Aloha and welcome back to Wanderous. I am your host, Andrew Crusoe, and this is a show designed to inspire you to go outside your comfort zone, or at the very least, you can just live vicariously through me. Today, we're going to talk about Marseille a little bit more because I had a very special experience after the events of the previous episode that you have probably heard recently. I went to a place called Palais Longchamp. Now, Palais Longchamp is this huge monumental building completed in 1869 that they built when they finished Canal de Marseille. So it turns out that there aren't very many freshwater sources naturally going to Marseille. It's a great port, but it's not great in terms of supporting a large population with fresh water. And after some pretty nasty cholera outbreaks in the 19th century, people were protesting, which is something French people are very good at. And that's one of the reasons why I feel France is a great country, because the people really do speak out and change happens. And after some protests, they started this massive project to build Canal de Marseille and bring, it was about something like 70 kilometers, and they built all these aqueducts and viaducts and all these things, and they finally brought a bunch of fresh water down to the city. And it's still used to this day, although there are other water sources now. So it took them 30 years to build this monument, Palais Longchamp, which is just in the 4th arrondissement. It's just really pretty near downtown, and didn't take me long to get there via the bus. As I mentioned in previous episodes, I had a unlimited weekly pass on the metro, which I really recommend. And I got there, and you can look this up, like, it's gorgeous. There is a multi-level fountain and this beautiful this beautiful statue of it's a metaphorical statue where there's these three women who are half naked in the French tradition of making statues of half naked people. Tastefully done, where the women symbolize, what is it? The river, wheat, and the vine, like wine, I believe. I'll have to double check that. But you can see, this is definitely going to be in the photos for this episode. Of course, almost every episode, has a special bonus post only for people who support the show. I have to say this every episode because sometimes people come in and this is their first episode. Welcome. I really appreciate you listening. And today we're going to share a little story about Palais Longchamp and maybe my favorite place in Marseille is where I went right after. And it's called Friche. And it's this crazy art project that you just walk through. But first, Palais Longchamp. So Palais Longchamp took 30 years to build, and it has a museum on either side. Unfortunately, I arrived quite late. Around this time in my France adventure, the heat was starting to get to me. It was August, and I was staying in a place that did not have air conditioning. I was relying on a fan, which is fine, except that I was on a main road in south of Marseille, and it was loud to such a point where I could not fall asleep because of the traffic. I did not figure out my sleep hack yet, which I will share in a later episode. But I figured out some sleep hacks in order to survive the very warm nights. We're talking about 30 degrees Celsius at midnight, 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And at one point I was putting water, this is maybe part of the life hack, I was putting water on my sheets, just putting like water on these thin sheets just to cool my chest down because I was not used to that amount of heat. Where I grew up, it doesn't get that warm at night. Everything tends to cool off. So my sleep schedule was pretty goofy at this point. I was starting my day a lot later than I wanted to, but I was pushing myself to go somewhere about every other day and explore Marseille, this vibrant, culturally rich, incredible city, the largest city in the south of France and the second largest city in the country. So I took the bus to Longchamp Park, which is a beautiful place, and I just sort of walked around and I think I have a very silly photo of me. One of the things I love about Palais Longchamp, aside from the obvious gorgeous fountain that's in the front, is that if you go up, you take the steps up and around, you can get a view from the top of the fountain, which I got a very funny view of that. But you also can enjoy these very funny, like little stalactites and stalagmites that they've carved as part of the dedication and their commemoration of finishing the canal from the river Durance. So they have this l'eau de la Durance, the water of the river Durance has arrived in the territory 8th of July 1847. So they have all this history written in French. But if you have trouble, if you ever get to a foreign country and you get to a sign and it's in a language you don't understand, I will recommend, and they are not a sponsor and they should be, I will recommend the Google Translate app. It can really be, frankly, a lifesaver. It definitely was for me in Japan, which is a story we'll get to. Really a lifesaver, and there is a mode called the Google Lens mode where you can tap the camera button and you can just point your camera and it will live translate. It'll do optical character recognition. It'll recognize the letters. Now you have to have, some contrast. It has to be decent. If it's super dark, it might have trouble interpreting the letters, but it will translate live, which is one reason why I really recommend you get a local SIM card, really get data wherever you go, because once you have data, you can translate stuff anywhere you are, almost anywhere, as long as you're in cell tower range, which is most places now, and you can read these signs in your local language and have a much better experience. So I got a probably very dorky photo of me in front of these stalactites, which I'll include in the behind the scenes photo collection for this episode. I also could very clearly see Notre Dame de la Garde, the basilica that we visited in the last episode, on the hill, very obviously tallest point in Marseille, very pretty. And I was also delighted to see the waxing gibbous moon, the growing moon, rising in the sky at around 8:30. And I enjoyed myself there for a while. There used to be a zoo behind Palais Longchamp, sort of in the park area, but they shut it down because the locals don't really believe zoo at the time. They were like, zoos, maybe not the best treatment of the animals. Maybe we should just not do zoos. And that's becoming increasingly popular. And people are questioning the ethical dimensions of having a zoo in the first place. I think there are exceptions. I would say that the Australia Zoo in Australia, in Brisbane, which is a place I'd like to visit perhaps next year, is a notable exception because of the massive conservation efforts that the Irwin family, the massive work that they do through that zoo. I don't think that's questionable at all, but some of the zoos are a bit questionable. So I would say definitely check out Palais Longchamp. It's a beautiful monument. It's a beautiful place to hang out in the afternoon. There are places to sit. There are places that you get cover from the rain if it's going to be a little rainy. And there's good energy. And if you get there earlier, you can check out the museums nearby, which I didn't get a chance to check out. Maybe next time. Although there was something funny that I recall, and I don't have a photo of this, but I'm remembering it now. There was it seemed like a theater event. people had like these colorful costumes, and you'll come across this, like there'll be like randomly incredibly artistic things happening in France. And if I recall correctly, I think it was a end of a birthday celebration or something. People just decided to just hang out. It was some major life event. I think it was a birthday. And I wish I'd taken a photo of those people, but sometimes it's not in the flow to be like, oh, could I take a picture of you wearing this very colorful, funny thing? Sometimes the moment moves too quickly, and I didn't get that. But I did get some lovely views from the top of the fountains itself. And that's what it sounds like, I suppose. Yeah, I like these live photos. I take photos with my iPhone as well, so you get a bit of audio, but the majority that I take are taken with my Olympus TG6, which is the only camera that's compact, waterproof to 15 meters, has a 4-time optical zoom, and shoots in RAW. There's a nice confluence of features there. They're not a sponsor, but they should be. It's a good camera. I like that camera. And so I started making my way to La Friche, which is a place I learned about due to meetup.com. Now, here's a big travel tip, and I've said this before. I don't know if I've stressed this on this podcast, but I feel like I'm continually telling people about meetup.com. Meetup.com is one of your best resources for connecting with local events, sort of regardless of what country that you're in. Now, some countries don't use it very much. Some places don't use it very much, but the places that do, it's a really great way to get an idea of what's going on, what is available to people who are visiting. And if you don't know, it's basically anybody can make a little group and they can basically do a special interest event. The majority of these events are free to attend. There are things like photography walks, hikes, even just language exchange, people going to a pub and getting a drink, like just like a local, like a foreigner exchange, cultural exchange. Little meetups happen all the time in major cities, especially across Europe. And I learned about one such meetup happening at a converted factory, which was very mysterious to me the first time I went there, because I was trying to wrap my head around this complex of stairwells and multi-level nooks and crannies and massive containers that looked like they contained gas. It was like a hectare. It was like an acre. It was big. And there was going to be a film shown, projected onto a large screen. In fact, it was going to be the film The Artist, with John Goodman and some other very notable people. And The Artist is very interesting because it is a black and white, silent, modern movie. I think it's silent. Anyway, there had to be captions, of course, because this was the French version of The Artist. But I wanted to go. I wanted to network with some people, and I invited the friend that I mentioned in the past episode, and I was very disappointed that she couldn't make it in the last minute. So I found myself, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I arrived via bus at this kind of weird, angly, like rusted gate, and I turn, and there's this open pavilion area, and then you can keep continuing, and then you're in not that narrow, actually. You're in this concrete valley. That's all I can say. You're in this concrete valley covered in very artistic painting and graffiti here and there, but actual painting, different designs and different star patterns. And it's a skate park. There's a skate park sort of just below the street level, perfectly subsumed into the environment. And you cross, and there's some people doing, it was pretty popular. There were kids, older people, tweens, people in their 20s, and you go around, you take the stairway up And there were some killer like angles for photography. There were just so much to look at. And the people who support the show on patreon.com/HelloCrusoe will see some of my favorite photos that I took from that day. The art, even the graffiti, is just gorgeous. And some pretty lovely flower pictures as well, apparently. But I got there early. I got there maybe half an hour early. And I just started wandering this complex. And it reminded me... people who have played this game, if you haven't, it's all right. But it reminded me of Portal, the video game Portal, especially Portal 2, where there would be these like, gangways and these bubbly structures that you could just walk around, and it was just a bizarre mix of this industrial park, essentially, woven together with, there were trees growing around this, they had started to rehabilitate the area. And it was a very funny juxtaposition. It's a very odd place to describe. Very odd place to describe. You could come around, you went up to the second level. There were multiple buildings, multiple like levels of this place. But the most interesting part was the skate park. And above the skate park, I would take a full floor above it. So I took the staircase, and there was this flat area, which is pretty much like ground level. And people had started setting up chairs. And I asked them if they needed any help, and they said, no. And the screen was already inflating. It was this big inflatable situation. And they said, "Wait, we're not going to start for like a half an hour." So I just start wandering around and seeing, and I realized that this is a marketplace. Like, they actually rent out. Further down, there is a corridor outside, and there are these areas. There's little office spaces. This whole industrial park has been totally converted. And I was scratching my head trying to figure out what the heck was this place. And I didn't find out for some time. So the official name for this place is Le Champ des Mai. Le Champ des Mai? Please forgive my pronunciation. And they do summer events here. And they set up things like this. They set up chairs, and people do movies, and they do other events. I think they do like picnics perhaps. So I got some very funny photos of this black and white film being projected, and the almost full moon glowing right behind the projector. It was pretty enjoyable, even though they did not have English subtitles. I was mistaken. I sort of put it together, and it was a good experience to at least watch a film with some sweet people. There were maybe 50 people there, just sitting, enjoying the warm, breezy evening air of Marseille. At around 9:30 was when the twilight finally started to dissipate and become darkness. This was August, and the days are still quite long in the south of France in August. I mean, even at 7:40 p.m., it was very light, and I found myself, before the movie started, just watching from the second level. You could look down into the entrance where kids would play with the soccer balls, football. That's what they call it there, of course. And they were just having a blast. It was just a really nice moment. And then in the distance, the train zipped by. The train route actually goes right beside La Friche. Apparently, La Friche means rubbish or the trash. sort of a Marseille joke, because it was very, very much created from recycled materials. That's what I came to understand anyway. If I'm wrong about that, please leave a comment on Patreon. I want to know. I want to correct myself if I'm mistaken about something. But the proper name of the place was what I said before. It's Le Champ des Mai, I think it was called. But yeah, Le Champ des Mai. but and I think you can find it under that name in Google Maps, but people just colloquially call it La Friche. And I'm quite surprised I didn't take more pictures of this, because I have a lot of memories of just wandering around this place. It was really it felt like another dimension. It felt like another century going around this like converted industrial park, with these weird, the kind of place that would have like an elevator, but it'd be locked and you'd have to take the exterior staircase, and there's like wild graffiti along the staircase, and it was a very like cyberpunk, vaguely cyberpunk kind of vibe to it. But in the skate park area especially, the art was quite good, I thought. It was very creative. There was a real sense of play. Even on the edges of the complex, I come across what looks like a painting of an African woman with a halo painted in these teal pastels on one of the support beams, and just really beautiful, creative, very playful art all over the place. It was a very good feeling, and also just absorbing the afternoon, because at 7:30 it was still acting like afternoon. The days were so long. These horizontal sun rays, just golden light hitting this art, was very lovely. In fact, it was pretty remarkable weather that whole week. It was pretty hot, but it was overall very, very ideal in a lot of ways. And I would benefit from that 2 days later, when I finally took the long bus ride, still covered by my unlimited Metro Pass, by the way. The long and tricky, I might say, bus ride to Cassis, which is right on the coast. A little town, a beautiful little town, right on Côte d'Azur, right on the Blue Coast, right on the Mediterranean. One of the prettiest towns I went to in France. I spent an afternoon there, and it was just gorgeous. Really, really, really beautiful place to walk around. And then I almost got marooned there. And I'll tell you that whole story next time. Thanks again for listening to Wanderous. I'm endeavoring to share my tips, little places you probably haven't heard of. When you're traveling, and especially when you're couch surfing, which I did a bit in Marseille, things come to you, locations come to you, invitations come to you, especially when you're in a place for a few weeks that you would not otherwise be exposed to. And I'm happy to share all that I've learned in those experiences. I really want to inspire you to go outside your comfort zone and to see how your world expands in proportion to your courage. I don't know who said that. Somebody said that. Who is that? I feel like it was one of the president's wives. The world shrinks and expands in proportion to your courage. But regardless of who said it, I feel like it's really true. It's been my experience. So why don't you do something today that pops your bubble a little bit, that stretches you a little bit? You might be surprised. You might be surprised what you find. My name is Andrew Crusoe. You can always follow this show for free on Patreon. I really appreciate it if you go to patreon.com/HelloCrusoe, HELLOCRUSOE. Or if you aren't already, click on the link there to find this show on Spotify. I think, yes, if you type in Wanderous, you found this show somehow. I really appreciate it when people who follow, they follow in both places, because it helps the algorithm and it makes sure that you don't miss any of these episodes. Something like 90% of these episodes are totally free. Occasionally, I do a very special episode for people who donate every month. I give a behind-the-scenes episode about some of the more personal, more hilarious, tragic aspects occasionally. Sometimes very funny adventures in dating, sometimes other personal bits, and I also share behind-the-scenes photos. to give you more context and to give you more of an inside look into how I've been traveling nomadically on a shoestring budget. Although Marseille was actually, this was the most expensive month of I would say of the past 2 years. It was the most expensive moment of the trip because I sprung for an Airbnb. And France is not cheap. Accommodation is not cheap in France, unless you're very lucky. But I was in a good location overall, and a lot of things were walkable, including some of the calanques, which I think we'll talk about again. Yes. After Cassis, I go one of the most beautiful. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to show you these photos. When I hiked to Croix de Marseille, the cross of Marseille, which is a cross on one of the highest points south of Marseille. And what a wonderful hike. Even if you're not into hiking, it was such a beautiful hike. Not really that hard, just takes a little bit of time. And that's coming up in the next few episodes. That's coming up where I discover an old fountain with a legend attached to it. So please follow along to Wanderous. I really appreciate your comments. I really appreciate if you enjoy this show, especially if you're able to rate this show on Spotify. That really, really helps. And eventually I'm going to get this show into normal Apple Podcasts, but right now I think most people are listening to Spotify anyway. So thank you so much. As we say in Hawaii, mahalo nui loa, and I will talk to you next time.